welcome. Once you have a Bible, you can open up to Judges chapter 14. Judges chapter 14, and we will continue our study through the book of Judges and looking at the life of Samson. The life of Samson, and we started his life last, or a look at his life last week, and so let me show you where we're at in Judges chapter 14. This is how I broke down the chapter. Three main divisions is what I call them. The first being in verses 1 to 4, I call secret plan. So we will see that, we'll see what that secret plan is all about. Verses 5 to 9, we'll see surprise strength. So those two sections will together will be the first half of the chapter. The second half of the chapter, but the third main division, is a sinful party. And so we will see a sinful party scene there in verses 10 through 20. Judges chapter 14. Samson, everybody knows, well, I shouldn't say everybody knows, but many of us know about Samson. And probably if we do not know much about Samson, what we do know is that he was the strongest man ever to live. He had just incredible superhuman strength. We'll find out today where that came from and what it was supposed to be used for. So we'll see that here in Judges chapter 14. And we are going to jump into the first section, which is the secret plan in verses 1 to 4. We'll pick it up in verse 1. And what I did was I've got a couple of subpoints here under secret plan. And the first is seen, simply seen. And we'll see the reason for that in verse 1 of Judges chapter 14. Now Samson went down to Timnah. Now, real quickly, who is this Samson guy? Samson, we learned in the previous chapter, was he was born. He had a miraculous birth. His parents could not have children, and then God sent a message and said, "You're going to have a child. In fact, you're going to have a son." And that son, Samson, it was told to his parents that son would begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. What's all that about? The Philistines, as we'll be reminded of here in this chapter, the Philistines were another people group separate from the Israelites, and they were oppressing the Israelites. And the reason that they were oppressing the Israelites was not just because the Israelites were just so very innocent. It is because the Israelites had been disobedient to God. Now, the Israelites are God's people, but they've been disobedient to their God. So what God does, and he does this over and over and over again throughout the book of Judges, what he did was he brought the Philistines to come and persecute or oppress his people, the Israelites. Now, Judges, the entire book of Judges, spans about 300 years in the history of Israel. And the entirety of the book is focused on, let me go back real quick, because we have the ability to do this because we're so cool here. We've got the faithlessness of man. So throughout the book of Judges for those 300 years, and it goes beyond. It's been happening before, and it's still happening to this day, 2000 and whatever year we're in, 25. The faithlessness of man. So man has a problem remaining faithful to God. The problem is they're selfish. People are selfish. So even God's people throughout the book of Judges were faithless toward God, and we'll see that again. Be reminded of it here again today. And then what we are doing is highlighting, we're not just looking at the faithlessness of man and then leaving without any hope. We're highlighting each chapter throughout each story as we come to each character, the faithfulness of God. That is the contrast there. And so we find ourselves here. Let's keep going. And we're back there seeing. Let's find out what's going on. Verse 1. Now Samson went down to Timnah. Now again, this Samson, at the end of the previous chapter, the Bible tells us that he was born miraculously to his parents, and that he is that God began to move on Samson. What does that mean? We'll get a glimpse of that or an idea of that here today. But Samson goes down to Timnah. Now, in Timnah, we're not told this, but we're going to find out here in just a moment. Timnah was a place where the Philistines were living. And the Philistines were enemies of God and enemies of God's people. So it says that he goes down to Timnah, and he saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Sounds innocent enough at this point. He goes down to Timnah and sees a woman. Okay, so he saw a woman. What does that mean? Well, we'll find out very quickly here in just a moment that this is more than just seeing a woman. What he's doing is, in fact, lusting after a woman. But the question has to be asked, and I will say this. This is the first of many questions. As I was studying through chapter 14 here, getting ready for today, I almost came up with more questions than I had answers to. And the fact is that when as we get into this, we're going to find that there are some questions. There are details that you and I do not have, that were not provided to us. And so they are left to the imagination, but we will obviously see the important parts and the important points, and we'll be able to take something from that. But here's one. He goes to Timnah. Why is he going to Timnah? That's where the Philistines live. He's an Israelite. Why is he going down there? Now, we do not know what his reason was for going down there. It could have been that he was simply going down to find a woman, a wife. So we're told here that he goes down to Timnah, and here's where I got my title, Seen, for my subpoint. It says that he saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now, this is not unusual. He's going to end up somewhat anticlimactic, but I'll go out on a limb and do that. He's going to develop a relationship with this woman. It's not strange that he would see a woman and be interested in her. The fact is that most often relationships begin with a first look, right? There's something about them that we like. They may fit our criteria, of their outward appearance, but that's oftentimes how it begins. It's a strange thing to me because I'm an old guy, maybe not such a strange thing to you, although right now I think it might be strange to you, but as you get a little bit older, it might not be as strange. But now, because of technology, social media, and apps, you have lots and lots and lots of dating apps. And you can join any of those dating apps, and you can do what? You can swipe through all of the available potential partners there, potential spouses there. And so you can swipe right very easily and go, no, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that. And we would be fools to think that for the most part, when someone's on one of those dating apps, that they're not looking at the outward appearance first. And they see the outward appearance, oh no, swipe. See the outward appearance, oh no, swipe. And people are stopping and looking and taking a second look, digging in a little bit deeper when they see that the outward appearance requirements have been met. Well, he or she has blonde hair or dark hair or red hair or green hair, or they don't have any hair or whatever, and they've got this color eyes, and they're this weight, or they're this size, this height. And so we use those as the initial kind of, as we're checking someone out, we go, oh, what does the outward appearance look like? Now, that's not necessarily so bad, but of course we do not want to stay there. That would be very shallow. So we always want to dig in deeper. Now, for a Christian, I'm not saying for anybody else, but for a Christian, first question is always, is this person a Christian? That's always the most important. The Bible is very clear. In the New Testament, we are told not to be unequally yoked together with an unbeliever. Now, that might be in business or in some other partnership, but especially in the area of relationships. To be unequally yoked with an unbeliever is a bad thing because it means that you're both going in different directions. And when the Bible says do not be unequally yoked, it's using a farming imagery from farming. And the idea of being yoked is two animals that you put a wooden yoke over, a wooden beam, and that would be used to fasten or tie those two animals together so that they can be effectively used for plowing a field. All of us, you may not have ever seen that, you may have seen pictures or something like that, but all of us have probably seen something like the Iditarod or sled dogs. And they have several dogs that they would chain up together on a sort of a long leash, and those dogs would pull the sled, the person driving the sled and whatever else he or she might have on it. That's the idea, is that you want to find two animals that match, because you wouldn't want to get a husky. You're trying to go across Alaska, through the frozen tundra, and you gather your dogs, and you've got some husky, some team of huskies, and then you take your little cocker spaniel, or your little poodle, or your little rat dog, or whatever, and you just chain them up like, oh, he's so cute, she's so cute, so let me just chain them up there, I'm sure they'll do fine. You got the picture. No way that's going to work out well. You're going to have dogs that are born for pulling, and you're going to have one that wants to be pulled. We've got dogs at our house, 3 of them, one big one, 2 small ones, and I'm telling you none of the 3 would survive. They would all want to be pulled. They'd all be looking at me like, can I get on the sled and be pulled? So the idea is you want to find these 2 animals that are going in the same direction, and they're both compatible. Well, that's the idea in the Bible also, is that we always want to find somebody who's compatible, who has the same values as us, the moral standards as us, and our standards are biblical standards. So we always want to find someone. So the fact that he's going down to Timnah, for whatever reason I do not know, but we know that he finds this Philistine woman, and the first thing that he's drawn to is whatever her outward appearance was, because it says there in verse 1 that he saw a woman in Timnah. So he's looking with his eyes. He's not looking with his heart. He's not waiting for God to bring a wife to him. He's going around like, hey, look at that hot girl over there. And he finds this woman. Now, in verse 2 of Judges chapter 14, it says, so he went up and told his father and mother, saying, I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife. Now why does he tell his father and mother? Well, because when you are wanting to marry somebody, it's always good to tell your father and mother, number one. But also at this time, they would be conducting themselves, or the way that this marriage would take place, it was that it would be arranged by parents. It was an arranged marriage. You can like that or not like that, whatever, that's what they were doing. So he goes and he tells his father and mother. But I want you to see here in verse 2, I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Those are the enemies of Samson's people, the Israelites. Now therefore, get her for me as a wife. It seems to us that he's making demands on his parents. He will do this again here in just a moment. We'll see at the end of verse 3, get her for me, for she pleases me well. He's making demands. Now, some of you have studied through the Old Testament with us, and you remember something called the 10, what was it again? Commandments. Yes, very good. And one of those said something about father and mother. What are we supposed to do? Honor your father and mother. Very good. Does it sound like he's honoring his father and mother? It sounds to me like he's making demands on them. I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife. So his goal here in this scenario, you can see, is to get himself a wife. He wants to make this woman his wife. Now, again, he would have been instructed, like all of the other Israelites, not to partner or become a spouse with or marry someone who was not an Israelite. They were taught, they were commanded to marry other Israelites. Why? Again, so that they would share the same values, they'd be heading in the same direction. It's not going to work if the person is not sharing your values and your ethics and things. And so that was important. So he's already, you can see, and there is a sense in which this entire chapter has to do with flirting. We see him here, no doubt he's flirting with this woman, but he's also flirting with sin by wanting to get involved with his Philistine woman. But he's also flirting with sin and making demands of his parents. So this is not starting out so well. Samson had been planned and chosen by God from before he was even born. God was going to use him. But it doesn't sound like he's too keen on being used by God. Sounds like he wants to do his own thing. Verse 3 goes on. Then his father and mother said to him. Here's how they respond. I think they respond well. Is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren or among all my people that you must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? Now that's a great response. They question him, his desires. They say, listen, what is it that you're doing here? You know that you're not supposed to be going down and getting a wife from the Philistines, and we'll talk about that phrase, uncircumcised Philistines, in just a moment. But they're trying to correct him here. Now, it turns out, at least in my opinion, and I'm going to share my opinion a few times, maybe a little bit more often than I normally do when I'm teaching, but I'm going to share my opinion in a few of these areas. And here's one. It's a good response, but they don't seem to hold their ground. They're going to end up giving in to Samson. But I like their initial response. Why would you do this? We don't marry the Philistines. You got to marry an Israelite. And they even asked him that. They said, is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren or among all my people, in other words, the Israelites, that you got to go down and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? It's a great response. It's a great question. And I love in verse 3 there where he says, he calls them the uncircumcised Philistines. Now, many of you know what that's a reference to, but I'll explain. Uncircumcised Philistines is almost a derogatory term or name for the Philistines, because the Israelites and God had an agreement. It was called a covenant. And a sign of that covenant, and this had been determined by God. God told them, as a sign of the agreement, I want all of the males to be circumcised. And so if you're not really familiar with, well, what is circumcision? Circumcision is a minor surgery performed on the outside of the body of a male. Males only can get this surgery. So that's as far as I'm going in my description. That's all you need to know. But this was something that was an outward sign of that agreement or that covenant. So when the parents say, why are you looking for this uncircumcised Philistine? What they're doing is they're reminding their son Samson, uncircumcised means they don't have an agreement or a covenant with God. These are not God's people. These are the enemies of God. So why are you going to them? Why would you do that? And Samson replied at the end of verse 3 to his father, get her for me, for she pleases me well. Really? What is it that she does that pleases you so well? But the first part of that is more problematic. Get her for me. He's making demands. He's not honoring his father and mother. He's making demands. He's saying, this is what I want. It's almost like a little baby who's, throwing a fit because they don't get what they want. Just get her for me. Come on, just do what I'm telling you to do. It's like a little kid, in the store wanting some candy, making demands of their parents. That's not an honorable thing. It's not a way to honor your father and mother. This is an uncircumcised Philistine, an enemy. Why is Samson, why is he attracted to her? Well, there's a few thoughts that I have. We're not told exactly why. So again, this is conjecture. This is opinion on my part, which means if it's my opinion, you don't have to accept it. You could throw it out because we're not told. I wonder if Samson, like so many people, is looking around at the Israelites. Oh man, these boring Israelites. All the women look the same. They dress the same, They don't want to go out and party and, have a good time. I'm going to go look for somebody somewhere else. And there are a lot of guys and a lot of girls. In this case, it's guys. I get it. There are a lot of people that are looking for that bad boy or that bad girl. Oh, they're different. You might look around and you go, look at Revival. Like, oh, all these boring Christian girls, They're just so nice and they want to be obedient to the Lord. They don't want to party it up and have fun. I'm going to go look somewhere else for some other girl. And they go out looking somewhere else because, oh, you know what? She's so different. And she does this or she looks this way or her family's different. And for many people, those are things that are attractive to them. I mean, it's not brand new, and it's not your generation. It's been going on for a long time. You can watch, the classic Hollywood movies from the 50s will, show you, Marlon Brando riding in on his motorcycle, and he's got the leather jacket and the leather boots, and he's a bad guy, and, people are drawn to him. I mean, that's just an image that for many people is attractive. And so it may be that Samson is going, hey, you know what? She's different. She looks different. She acts different. She is different. She's got different thoughts and ideas and whatever. It may be that because she's a Philistine, that she will do things easier than the Israelite women will. It might be that she will delve into sin and sinful pleasures easier than the Israelite women will. The Philistines, these are not, it's not the Cleavers. It's not Ward and June Cleaver. These are not like wholesome people. These are people that include sexual practices. We've talked about it a lot. Sexual practices in their worship. So it may be that he's looking at that and going, well, you know what? She'll do anything I want or ask. And so, you know what? I want this woman. We're not told exactly what it is. We're only told that he wants her and he's making demands of his parents and specifically of his dad. Now, we see that going on. This is not a good start. Doesn't sound good, but let's finish up this little section here in verse 4, and this is what I call seeking. We saw seeing, that's Samson. He's looking with his eyes, not with his heart, not with his faith, looking with his eyes only. In verse 4, we see a seeking, and it says in verse 4, but his father and mother did not know that it was of the Lord. That he was seeking, that's God, seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines. You see, the Philistines were against God. And so God is now looking for an opportunity to move against the Philistines. If the Philistines were going against God, God says, I'm looking for an opportunity to go against them. He wants to free his people from the Philistines. So God is seeking, where you have Samson seeing with his eyes and lusting after this woman. You have God going much, much deeper and seeking an opportunity to free his people. And then it says in verse 4, for at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. They were ruling over Israel. So God wants to free them. Interesting that God has a plan. Samson at this point in his life, and it seems to be early in his life, is only concerned, he's not concerned with God's plan, he's concerned with finding him a Philistine woman. That's all he's concerned with. Yet God is going to use that as an occasion to move against the Philistines. Now again, I told you that this chapter raises some questions for me. There are some things that I do not understand. I have no shame in sharing those with you. I'll share that with you right now. Does this mean that God is okay with Samson being disobedient to what God has already said and to his parents? No, I do not believe so. Why is God using this guy if he's being this way? Well, because God, he's got a bigger plan. I told you that this is a secret plan. Nobody else knows about this. His mom and dad do not know about it. Samson doesn't know about it. But God's got a different plan. And here's a easy, plain fact. God uses imperfect people. You see, at this time, he's actually using the Philistines as a form of discipline for his own people. So he's using the ungodly Philistines, so he can use them. He certainly can use this Israelite Samson, who is a compromising individual, compromising with sin, flirting with sin. So God can use him. Now, I do not know if this means, because it says, but his father and mother did not know that it was of the Lord. What does that mean? Does that mean that God was causing Samson to sin? I do not believe that. Did God make him like this woman, lust after this woman? I do not believe that. I do not believe so. God doesn't lead us into temptation, right? He doesn't lead us into sin. So what is God doing? I believe that what God is doing is he's using this imperfect individual to accomplish his greater plan. Now, Samson, we will find out, not today, but at the end of his story, Samson is going to pay the price for all of this behavior. So God is not okay with it. He's simply allowing it right now for the time being. It's his, what we call his permissive will, which we've talked about throughout the book of Judges, his permissive will. He's permitting it, but that doesn't mean that he's okay with it. It's hard for us to understand or comprehend, but God's able to do that. So his father and mother didn't know that it was of the Lord. And so it's just a reminder that sometimes Christians are making bad choices. And you just think, oh man, God's plan has failed. Nothing's going to work out. We do not know. God's always got a secret plan you and I do not understand. We don't understand all of it. So at that time, the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Let's move into our second main division, which is the surprise strength. Verse 5. So Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother. So they give in. I do not think that they should have given in, but they gave in and they went. Maybe God's orchestrating it, pushing them to go. I don't know all those particulars, all those minute details were not given, so we're not sure. But his father and mother, verse 5. So Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother, and came to the vineyards of Timnah. Now, to his surprise, a young lion came roaring against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he tore the lion apart as one would have torn apart a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Now, what we see here, and I'll put it up here right now for you, is we see the source of this surprise strength in verse 6. But I want you to note a couple of things in verse 5. He goes back down to Timnah with his father and mother, and he came to the vineyards of Timnah. Now he's traveling with his father and mother. But what's about to happen happens at a vineyard. Now, again, we do not have the minute details. Was he in the vineyard? Was he visiting the vineyard? Was he stopping for some grapes and some wine? Was he passing by? What is the deal? Well, we're not sure. It doesn't say specifically. But what we see here again is a flirting with disaster. Why do we say that? Well, you may remember from the previous chapter that Samson is a Nazirite. You go, what's a Nazirite? I thought you said he was an Israelite. He is an Israelite. The vow of a Nazirite was a vow that an Israelite could take. That's simply called the Nazirite vow. And that included, among other things, no cutting of the hair. That's why I call Samson the Fabio of the Old Testament, because you just get this picture of him with this long hair and he's just so cool or whatever. But one of the other parts of the vow of a Nazirite was no grapes or grape products. That included wine. That included just grapes themselves. It also, sadly, would include no grape jelly, which is pretty terrible, sad. But no grape products. He was to be completely devoted to the Lord, no alcohol, no wine, none of that. He had to stay clear of it all. That was part of the vow. So then why, in verse 5, is he coming to the vineyards of Timnah? He's not supposed to be there. Now again, maybe he's just passing by. I feel like the same kid is dying every single Sunday. Do you guys hear that? Yeah. This feels like the same every Sunday, the same kid is dying. And it was funny because when we were in first service, we weren't having service yet. We were just sitting back here and everything's getting ready. There was a little kid screaming just like that. And I was asking Matt, I said, man, I wonder if that's maybe it's one of like a PK, like a pastor's kid who's just here all day long. Because it was like screaming. It's like, I'm not sure. Matt said, he's either dying or having the time of his life. We couldn't tell. And right now, again, you can hear that kid screaming. It's like, man, should we call the police or, just, let him have the time of his life? Sounds like he's having the time of his life. But Samson here in verse 5 is not supposed to be in this vineyard, but he's there. Is he passing by? Was he in there being disobedient, violating the vow of a Nazarite? We do not know. We do not know. At the very least, we can say he's flirting with disaster. Now, as he's there, somehow his mom and dad, they get separated from Samson. Again, I don't know. Maybe they went to Timnah, and he said, okay, you guys go do your thing, and I'm going to go walk around. And he goes, hey, there's a vineyard. I'm going to the vineyard. I do not know that. But he's there alone, evidently, because at the end of verse 5, to his surprise, a young lion came roaring against him. And the Spirit of the Lord, in verse 6, came mightily upon him. Now, I already put up here for you, verse 6 is the source of his surprise strength. It's the Spirit of the Lord. Now, again, this is hard for you and I to get our minds around because up to this point, he seems to be disobedient. Why is the Spirit of the Lord coming upon him? Well, in this particular case, obviously, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him to protect him from that lion. His purpose has not been accomplished yet, what God is using him for. So God sends the Holy Spirit upon him and protects him so that what happens here in verse 6, look at this. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he tore the lion apart, as one would have torn apart a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand. That is incredible. Now, better Bible teachers than me, as I was studying through this, we're actually saying that there actually was a way, or still is a way, I guess, to tear apart a young goat. And evidently, it's done quite easily. And they were talking about how you would grab the hind legs and pull those in separate directions. And the goat would literally be ripped in half, which sounds so gruesome. Now, I've never seen it, so what I've done is I've got a video of it right now that I'm going to show. Just kidding. I don't have a video of that. That would be so great. Can you imagine all the emails I would get from your parents? They come in. Happy Father's Day, yeah. However that happened, we're not familiar with that stuff. But he tears this lion apart. And it says, though he had nothing in his hand. And at the end of verse 6, but he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. So the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. But I thought he's disobedient. He is. But God's protecting him because he needs to fulfill his purpose through Samson. What is his purpose? His purpose is to go after the Philistines. Remember that? He's going after the Philistines. So he's using this sinful individual to accomplish his plan. But you'll note at the end of verse 6, he didn't tell his father or his mother what he had done. Why is that? Well, again, we're not told why. I have some guesses. I am wondering if it's because he wasn't supposed to be at that vineyard. And they would have said, wait, where did this? They wouldn't have been, you know how parents are. Wait a minute. Where were you when this happened? No, Mom, Dad, you're not listening. I almost died. But you're still alive. And I might kill you. Where did this happen? Right? You know how parents are. So I'm assuming that he's like, oh, this happened at the vineyard. I can't tell him because I was at a vineyard. I wasn't supposed to be there. Or it might be, or maybe this surprised the heck out of him. Like, how did I just do this? This wasn't a young goat. This was a lion. How did I just do this? And maybe he's trying to process all of that. We're not told. But he doesn't tell them. Verse 7 says, then he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. So I like that. I don't know what they talked about. Maybe he said, hey, what do you think about, what do you think about the God of Israel? Oh, I think it's whatever. I don't know what happened. I don't know what they talked about. But Samson says, yeah, this is the one. After some time in verse 8, when he returned to get her, so they arranged the marriage, now he's coming back to get her, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the carcass of the lion. So this animal had been dead for a while, and obviously the carcass is laying there because other animals had come and eaten away everything else. But a swarm of bees had set up shop inside of the carcass of this animal, And they've produced some honey there because that's what bees do. And it says in verse 9, this is a total guy thing. He took some of it in his hands and went along eating. So he finds this dead animal. Oh, there's a swarm of bees. First of all, he approaches the swarm of bees because they've got honey and honeycomb in there. And however he did it, he grabbed a handful of that stuff. And then what he did is, what guys do, he just walked along eating it. Didn't matter that it was inside of a dead body. And it didn't matter, here's where I go. It didn't matter that he didn't have a plate or napkins, man. That sounds gross to me. When my son was younger, I would go, hey, dude, he'd be eating, like a guy does. I go, hey, man, give him a napkin. And he jokingly, he would look at the napkin and go, what's that for? It's like, wipe him on his shirt, whatever, little boys are, who cares, whatever. Sometimes not even little boys. I'm not looking at anybody specifically, but you know how guys are, right? Guys can do that kind of stuff. But he just takes off walking down the road eating this stuff. Now, here's what it says. Verse 9. He took some of it in his hands and went along eating. When he came to his father and mother, he gave some to them. And they also ate. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. Why? Well, again, maybe it's because they would have said, wait a minute, how did you know the carcass was there? And then he would have to tell him about the vineyard. Maybe it's because he's a Nazirite, and one of the other parts of the vow is he's not supposed to be touching dead bodies or carcasses. He's not supposed to be doing this. He does it. He seems to be careless about the things of God. Why is God still using this guy? Because God has a bigger plan. He's using the sinful individual to accomplish his purpose. Now, we move to the sinful party. Why do we call this a sinful party in verses 10 through 20? Well, it says in verse 10, so his father went down to the woman, and Samson gave a feast there, for young men used to do so. So as they're getting married, they plan this big feast. We're going to find out that it was actually 7 days long. But better Bible teachers than I, again, as I was studying, revealed to me that the word feast, actually the original word for feast, actually means a drinking party. Now again, Samson's not supposed to be drinking alcohol or wine. Why is he throwing a party that's a drinking party? You might say, well, he doesn't say he's drinking, and it doesn't. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. If he isn't, he certainly is flirting, once again, with sin. He's not supposed to be doing this. Yet, here he finds himself surrounding himself with all of this. And it happened in verse 11. When they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. Now, I want you to stop for just a moment and think back. What do we know about Samson so far? Well, we know that he's disobedient. He had this superhuman strength that he got from God's Spirit. So it's not his own strength, it's God's strength. But, okay. But who's he been with up to this point? Well, we know that he was talking to the young lady. Okay? But he wasn't partnered up yet. He's kind of back and forth. He's been with his mom and dad. Traveled with them a little bit to Timnah. We don't hear anything about friends. Fits the mold. Fits that bad boy image. The lone, biker riding into town on his motorcycle, and he's got the look, and he's all by himself, and he can handle himself, and he's self-sufficient, and, all alone. I stand alone, I don't go along with anybody. That's the image that we're seeing here. Do you understand? He's by himself. It's not wise. Had he had a good friend, they might have said, hey, Samson, you're being an idiot. Stop doing the things that you're doing. But he doesn't. He has isolated himself. He's with his parents, which is a good thing, but his parents don't seem to, they're not standing up to Samson. They're not stopping him from doing what he's doing. So he needs somebody else there to go, hey, knock it off, dude. Stop. But notice in verse 11, this to me sounds so sad. In verse 11, and it happened when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. They saw him. He showed up with his parents. And they look, in my mind, I imagine him going, the people going, look at this poor guy. He doesn't even have friends. Let's invite some friends to come and be friends with him. And so they went and grabbed 30 people. Now we're going to find out that these 30 guys are not good guys. Seems obvious, but let's move on and look at it. So it happens in verse 11, they see him, they bring 30 companions to be with him. Then in verse 12, Samson said to them, let me pose a riddle to you. If you can correctly solve and explain it to me within the 7 days of the feast, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. But if you cannot explain it to me, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. And they said to him, pose your riddle, man, that we may hear it. Now, what is he doing? I called this section, let's see if we can get up there, showing off in verses 10 through 18. Now, he's going to pose his riddle in just a moment, and it's going to be obvious to you because we just read through the story. You're going to know what the answer to it is. But at this point, they do not know. So he's feeling like, oh yeah, let me impress these 30 dudes that showed up, and I'm going to give them a riddle. I've got some information that they don't have. And he's making a bet. And notice what the bet is: 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. If you can't figure it out, you owe me. If you figure it out, I owe you. He's showing off is what he's doing. This is a prideful man. It's a sinful man. He's a prideful man. But he tells them here in verse 12, this is the bet that we're going to make. I've got a riddle for you. And then you have these linen garments. Now, linen back in that day, that was I mean, the priests wore linen garments. That's the reason why I wore my linen pants today, because you're winning in linen. Okay, just so you know. But linen, I mean, those were seen as fine garments. So he says we're going to make a bet here, and that's what he does. And so he poses the riddle. They say, okay, well, tell us, what's the riddle? Verse 14, so he said to them, out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. Now, for 3 days, they could not explain the riddle. You all know what the answer to the riddle is, right? What's he referring to? Anybody? Anybody? The lion and the honey. Got it. See me after class? I've got linen clothing for you. Joaquin and linen is going to be crazy. He's got information that they don't have, and he's feeling like, oh, I'm gonna look so cool to these guys. For 3 days, they could not explain the riddle. But it came to pass on the 7th day. Now, just pointing this out so you know, I'm not trying to hide, neither is anybody else. Some of the other translations or commentaries on this verse specifically say that it was the 4th day and not the 7th day. Because if it's the 7th day, it's a little bit confusing, doesn't really fit with the rest of the story. So it may have just been basically a typo, as they were translating this. But it says, it came to pass on the 7th day that they said to Samson's wife, who said that? The 30 guys. Entice your husband that he may explain the riddle to us. Why would I do that? Or else we will burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us in order to take what is ours? Is that not so? So they've just threatened Samson's wife. Threatened her life. Not threatened to expose her or threatened to harm her. They've threatened to kill her. We're going to kill you and your father and burn down the whole house with you guys in it. So I understand what she's about to do. It doesn't make it right, but I completely understand why she does what she does. So she hears that, and what does she do? So in verse 16, then Samson's wife wept on him and said, you hate me. You don't love me. That's what we call drama. Drama queen. Now guys, for the guys, we've only got a few of us in here. Hold fast, man. I'm going to share a little secret with you, okay? We've seen this lots of times before. If your girl, your woman, whatever, is using weeping and all of this drama, you hate me, you don't love me. she might be a Philistine. In which case, you need to run for your life. Okay? Because sometimes, I mean, the truth is that the ladies, they know that for a lot of guys, they can use this. Start crying. Oh, you hate me. You don't love me anymore. Oh, you won't buy me the ring. You won't buy me the car, whatever, and they can accomplish a lot using this stuff. Now, again, I understand why she's doing this. She's fearing for her life and her father's life. She doesn't want her family killed. I get it. But this is all bad. She's in a bad situation because of Samson. Samson's in a bad situation because he's disobedient to God, to his parents. None of this is good. And she says in verse 16, you have posed a riddle to the sons of my people, but you have not explained it to me. And he said to her, look, I have not explained it to my father or my mother, so should I explain it to you? You see what he just did? What he did, in his answer, he just revealed to his wife where his heart belongs. He goes, please, why would I tell you? I haven't even told my parents yet. In other words, my parents are more important to me than you are. Why would I tell you? This is for the ladies. Christian ladies. You know what the Bible says, right? For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. So if the guy that you are hooking up with and you're just so in love with, if he's going, please, I like my parents better than I like you. Here's some biblical counsel from your pastor. Dump the junk. Okay? What the man wants to do is, I'm not saying he has to forsake his parents. That's not a good thing either. But what he's got to do is in the relationship, as it's growing and as you guys are getting married, he's got to be saying, okay, now my wife is first and no longer my parents. That's the order of things. That's a biblical order. God set that up in Genesis. But here he reveals to her where her place is. Please, I haven't even told my parents. Why would I tell you? Now she wept on him the 7 days while their feast lasted. So again, remember I told you about, was it 7 days, the fourth day? When was that? Whenever it happened, it happened. Doesn't necessarily matter the days. But it says in verse 17, she wept on him the 7 days while their feast lasted. And it happened on the seventh day that he told her, because she pressed him so much. Then she explained the riddle to the sons of her people. She went and revealed it. So the men of the city, in verse 18, said to him on the seventh day before the sun went down. You see it? You see how that's all set up? Like coming at the last minute. They said to him, what is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than a lion? They had the answer. It says honey inside the lion. And he said to them, here's how he replies to them. If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Wait a minute. Wait. Hold on. What did he just say? He said, if you had not, again, this is an image borrowed from husbandry or farming. He says, you used my own animal against me. Now, that would have been bad enough. And everybody understands that what he's saying is, you used my wife against me. It would have been bad enough had he said, you used my own animal against me. But really, Samson, out of all the animals you could have used, really, a heifer? A heifer. A heifer is what? A heifer is a young cow. Really? You had to use that? That one, huh? Ducks live on farms. You can use a duck. A horse. You had to use a heifer, really. Ladies. Ladies, you get the point. If he's calling you a heifer, not a good setup. Right? It's not good. It's not a healthy relationship. If you're already married and he's calling you a heifer, please come see me. Okay, we'll get it straightened out. You ought not be doing this. Now, for him, it wasn't a derogatory term, farming. I mean, these were animals, and in fact, heifers, animals would have been very, very valuable. So he's not necessarily saying something bad about her. It's just the image that he uses. I mean, why he didn't say, "You use my wife against me," I don't know, but he just does it poetically. You plowed with my own heifer. You used my animal against me. You would not have solved my riddle. So what he does in verses 19 through 20 to finish up this chapter is we find out that he's a sore loser. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily. Why? What does God want to do? God wants to end the Philistines. Right? Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon, where there were Philistines, and killed 30 of their men, took their apparel, and gave the changes of clothing to those who explained the riddle. So his anger was aroused, and he went back up to his father's house. Now, he's a sore loser. And as he decides, I got to go get this clothing, he picks Ashkelon. He goes, I'm going to Ashkelon. I'm going to kill some people. I'm taking their clothing. Now, again, so many odd things happening in this story, because the thought that he would go to Ashkelon and grab 30 men, kill them, and then strip them is bizarre. I don't, that's just weird. But he does it. He's just so angry. He's a sore loser. He's so angry that he lost. He goes down and attacks these people. Now, I do need to say this. It may seem like, well, why would God allow that to happen? These are 30 innocent guys. In a sense, they weren't at the party. They didn't have anything to do with it. But do not forget that they were Philistines. And the Philistines were oppressing the Israelites. So they weren't innocent people. They were innocent as far as the party went, but they were not innocent individuals. They were part of the Philistines who were oppressing the Israelites. And so the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Now again, did the Spirit of the Lord come upon him just so he could go down and kill the 30 people? Did the Spirit of the Lord know that he was going to kill the 30 people, so he just came to protect him against the 30 people? I do not know. Did he go down and kill one man at a time? Did he attack all 30 all at once? We're not told any of that. What we're doing is we're highlighting the fact that though Samson has been faithless, God is still faithful. Though Samson has been faithless to God and to his people, God is still faithful to his people, using a sinful individual, an imperfect individual, very much imperfect. Probably a little too imperfect for our comfort. It's like, that doesn't fit my narrative, but this is what God's doing. We can't deny it. And then in verse 20, we find out Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. Now, these, again, who's his companion? His companion is one of these 30 random dudes that they pulled. He didn't bring his best friend with him. They went and got 30 guys to come and be his companion. So after he leaves, the dad, for whatever reason, thought that Samson wasn't coming back and said, you know what? He's not coming back. I guess we'll just give you to Samson's best man. I mean, this is a bad situation. And these 30 guys, think about this. If somebody goes over there and they go, hey, you guys want to come to this party, and celebrate this marriage? I don't know who that guy is. Why would I want to go there? It's a drinking party. Yeah, I'll go. If they're willing to go for that reason, that's not a good bunch of people. It's not people that you should be fighting yourself as your companions. They shouldn't be your companions. They shouldn't be your best man. And here again at the end, the wife is given to the best man. Why didn't the best man say, no, she's already married to Samson. No, I'm not doing that. Because he saw this woman too and just went with it. Samson is a wonderful example of what not to do. Disobedient to God, dishonoring his parents. He's a disobedient individual. This is not somebody to look up to. So what are we doing here? Again, we're highlighting, Not the faithlessness of man, but the faithfulness of God. God loves his people. He's got a bigger plan than Samson. He's got a bigger plan than Samson's sin. He can overrule the sin of the individual that he's using. You know, we're in a time of chaos in some parts of our country and around the world. We've all seen some of the protests and some of the rioting that's taking place just not too far away in LA. I mean, an hour away. We know that Israel is in a war with Iran. Hopefully you knew that. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we're talking about prophecy here, biblical prophecy. Things are happening. Russia's in the mix, and things are, we're seeing the world fall apart, but seeing God's plan fall into place. That's the point here, is that while people and the world fall apart, because that's what they do, God's plan is falling into place. There's something much bigger than the protests and the rioting. There's something much bigger than Israel and Iran. There's things that are bigger, and what's bigger? God's plan is bigger. As things fall apart, God's plan is falling into place. And he's using sinful individuals even to this day. Even to this day, using sinful individuals. Does that make it okay to sin? No. We ought to be striving for a life of righteousness. We ought to be trying to sin less and less. But always trust in God, that God's got a bigger plan. I see things right here. God sees all of it. If I'm sitting at a parade watching a band go by, I'm seeing one thing at a time. God sees the entire parade all at once. He's got a bigger plan than I do. And what we want to do is learn how to trust him through all of that, while at the same time striving to be better than Samson and how he lived. Imagine what God is going to accomplish through Samson, but what God could have accomplished had Samson set his heart on the Lord in obedience to him. He didn't do that. And we'll find out more about that, the sad ending of Samson, as we get into more of his story. One last thing I want to mention, and that is that we saw a couple of times in here, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. That's the way God operated up until Acts chapter 2. In Acts chapter 2, which happened about 2,000 years ago, there were Christians who were in an upper room. They were waiting for God. They were worshiping. And the Spirit of God came, just like the Spirit of God came here. But here's the thing. The Spirit of God came at that time in Acts chapter 2 and stayed. It filled every Christian and stayed with them. In this case, the Spirit of God would come upon Samson and then leave. And then come upon Samson and leave. And the Spirit of God operated that way throughout the Old Testament. It would come upon different people, to do different things and then leave again. But now, thank God, we have the Holy Spirit to lead us or guide us in our daily lives, 24/7. 24/7, the Holy Spirit is with us to help us. What a tremendous blessing. And any of us, when you become born again or a Christian or give your life to the Lord, whatever those are all synonymous terms, whenever you get saved, you get the Holy Spirit living inside of you, and it doesn't leave. What a tremendous blessing. What a tremendous blessing. Samson didn't have that, but we have that. We've got in a sense, we've got a leg up on Samson. So let's pray. Father, thank you so much for this passage and for the lessons.